Good afternoon. It's Sunday, January 22nd. I'm Aryeh O'Sullivan, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is slated to hold his first official telephone conversation with the new American President, Donald Trump, later this evening. Speaking at the start of the weekly cabinet meeting today, Netanyahu said he greatly appreciates the deep friendship Trump has for Israel, as well as his declared willingness to combat radical Islamic terror with full force. Netanyahu said that among the issues he intends to discuss with Trump by phone is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the situation in Syria, and the Iranian nuclear threat. Netanyahu added that blocking Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons continues to be the supreme objective of the State of Israel. Referring to proposed legislation by Jewish Home Leader Naftali Bennett that seeks to annex Ma'ale Adumim, Netanyahu assured his ministers that there is no one more concerned about the settlement enterprise than himself or the Likud government. Prime Minister asserted they will continue to take care of Judea and Samaria wisely and responsibly. The bill to annex Ma'ale Adumim was scheduled to come up for debate at today's cabinet meeting. However, Netanyahu managed to delay the discussions until further coordinates positions on the matter with the new Washington administration. However, the Jerusalem District Planning and Building Committee today wasted no time and has already approved the construction of 671 new housing units in various neighborhoods across the capital, including Ramot, Pisgat Ze'ev, and Ramat Shlomo. Some 100 homes will also be built in Jerusalem's Arab neighborhoods. Speaking to reporters today, Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barakat said, quote, "We have suffered 8 difficult years of Obama, who pressured Israel to freeze building, even though the municipality never really did so. Many times we were not given government approval, and sometimes homes were not put on the market because of U.S. pressure." Barakat expressed hope that that era is over and that he will continue to develop and strengthen the sovereignty over Israel's capital and create a unified Jerusalem. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is expected to be questioned once again this week in connection to allegations of corruption in 2 investigations against him. As of this hour, no exact time has been set, but sources close to the matter say he will be questioned by investigators from the police anti-fraud unit within the coming days. Over the weekend, Channel 2 reported that the Netanyahu family received personal favors valued at hundreds of thousands of shekels from billionaire film producer Arnon Milchan. According to the reports, the favors included jewelry for the Prime Minister's wife Sarah in 2004, when Netanyahu served as finance minister. Sarah Netanyahu reportedly sent Michelin a request specifying the jewelry she wanted with a price tag of some $8,000 from a specific store in Tel Aviv. Channel 2 stressed that while the jewelry episode is not part of the so-called 1,000 case, which the Netanyahus are currently being probed about, it certainly points to a pattern of behavior. The Prime Minister's office adamantly denied the reports. Earlier today, the Zionist Union Party and its head opposition leader Isaac Herzog submitted an appeal to the High Court of Justice demanding that the Prime Minister be suspended from his position as Minister of Communications due to his other investigation called the 2000 case surrounding meetings he had with the publisher of the Yediot Ahronot newspaper, Noni Moses. The petition cited a clear-cut conflict of interest. Referring to the Prime Minister's investigation, Police Commissioner Roni Al-Sheikh said today that the police have entered its last stretch in the probe and that they will most likely complete their work in the case in the coming weeks. During a briefing with reporters, Al-Sheikh said the police have been conducting their work without interference, nor have there been any leaks to the media. When asked whether there was enough evidence in order to press charges in the Netanyahu cases, Al-Sheikh said he was unable to respond, adding, "Your senses need to be sharp enough to understand that the police does good work." Relating to last week's incident in El-Hiran, where police officer Erez Levy was killed after he was run over by a car driven by a Bedouin teacher who was shot dead by police, the police commissioner stressed that at the moment, the police assessment remains that the incident was a terror attack. He said that up to now, there is no further evidence that contradicts this conclusion and rejected the theory that the Bedouin driver, Yaqub Al-Kayan, failed to hit brakes because he was shot in the knee. In related news, thousands of Israeli Arabs, many waving Palestinian flags, protested in Wadi Ara Saturday over last week's demolition of an illegal dwelling in the Bedouin village of El-Hiran in the Negev. Israeli Arab Knesset members from the Joint List attended yesterday's protest. Some of the demonstrators blocked Highway 65, forcing police to use stand grenades to disperse them. MK Ahmed Tibi called on Police Chief Roni Al-Sheikh and the Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan to apologize to the Al-Kayan family and the Israeli Arab public. The Diaspora Ministry has revealed the findings of the annual Antisemitism report for 2016, and it's not good. The report was presented today to the Cabinet by Diaspora Affairs Minister Naftali Bennett, and it found that antisemitism was on the rise in Germany and Britain, but actually dropped in France. Here to discuss the report is its author, Yogev Karasenti. Yogev, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So, Yogev, you put together this report. What would you say are the main points?
The main points are that we see increase in overall anti-Semitic incidents, but we see a decrease in the violent acts.
What countries are we watching anti-Semitism?
Mainly Western Europe, with special emphasis on the big communities in France, in the UK, in Belgium. And as you said, we saw very interesting trends this year. Overall rise in Germany, much of it because of the extreme right, Pegida and others political parties that, while they try to work against the waves of the immigrants and the refugees, they also promote laws that might affect the Jewish communities and especially their religious freedom.
You talk about the extreme right in Germany, but let's look at America for the moment. Many people say that they write off anti-Semitism. They say the Jews have it pretty good there. Yet we have this incidence of far right in places like Montana. Now, how is that being manifested, the anti-Semitism there?
Well, what we saw this year in the US is actually a penetration of the alt-right agenda into the mainstream. When you see the CNN headline that asks if Jews are people, and it stays there for quite a while, that's something which we haven't seen before. And the negotiation of this agenda as part of of the agendas that the American public can choose from is something that we see as very as alarming and dangerous trend.
So we see some anti-Semitism on the far right. Yet on U.S. campuses, we're also seeing anti-Semitism, which is coming from the far left.
That's coming from the far left, from what we see or what we call as the alliance of minorities mainly. And there they define Israel as a colonialist initiative. They define Israel, they say that Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians. And there they're actually treating Israel as the global Jew. What they used to say about Jews, now they're simply saying about Israel.
So let's take a look at the social media. I understand the report mentions that there's a vast increase in anti-Semitism in the internet. Well, how do you discover anti-Semitism on the internet? Are there mechanisms to look at that?
Yeah, actually, we built in the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, we built a monitoring project, the cyber monitoring project. It's the most advanced of its kind, and it's the biggest of its kind. We use here some of the Israeli high-tech companies. And what we do is monitoring the entire traffic on the web, and we are looking for anti-Semitic trade, anti-Semitic hate speech, anti-Semitic website, and what we see hubs of anti-Semitism. For example, we see a hub in the UK, we see a hub in France, we also saw a hub in the US, mainly due to the alt-right, and that allows us to better implement our policies or to build policies that would be more suitable for the kind of anti-Semitism that each country produces.
Yogev, how many people would you say have been exposed to anti-Semitism on the internet?
That is very interesting. From what we saw in France and England alone, we can speak about the potential is about 40 million. And that's only for two countries on Twitter on 1 month. And actually the overall number is much bigger, and I guess it's more than 100 million people.
I understand there's some positive news in the report about France.
Especially, well, in France, we see that when government are robust and they decide that they want to act against anti-Semitism, they can do so. Anti-Semitism is, it used to be considered as something that you cannot act against, something that people won't change their mind about anti-Semitism. But the case in France shows us that when a government is determined, they can achieve their goals. And we saw that with the amount of security forces that they deployed in the streets. We saw that with them closing the gap between legislation and enforcement. Today, if people are hate speech in France is considered illegal, it can lead to jail. And we saw that with speeches by Manuel Valls, the Prime Minister of France, saying that France won't be France without its Jews, and that every France should look at the immigration of French Jews as an insult for the French state. So when they are determined, they can reach their goals. And maybe one more thing about Europe. Today, government in Europe connect between anti-Semitism and terror. This is something they haven't done before. Till now, terror and anti-Semitism, or at least Muslim anti-Semitism was considered as some kind of extension of the conflict in the Middle East. And they were kind of tolerate towards it. Today, this toleration is no longer exists. They know that if it starts with Jews, it goes to the overall community later on. So in the public and in the enforcement forces, we see no more tolerance for this phenomenon.
Okay, Yogev Karsanti, the Director of Combating Anti-Semitism at the Diaspora Affairs Ministry. Thanks for joining IBA News.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. A day after U.S. President Donald Trump's inauguration, hundreds of thousands of women, many with husbands, children, and boyfriends in tow, took to the streets across the United States to protest Trump's comments on a wide array of statements against women, the disabled, and immigrants, to name a few. Many of the protesters included famous singers and actresses and wore purple and pink cat ears called pussy hats, protesting remarks made by Trump weeks before the presidential elections, where he was caught on camera talking about grabbing women's genitals. The protests took place in Washington, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Denver, and Boston. Solidarity protests were held across the world, from Europe to Sydney, Australia, and Tokyo in Japan. Participants in the global turnout, viewed as a mass outpouring of dissent, was estimated to be over 4.5 million.
I'm not trying to deny the danger that this day initiates. Trump and his handlers have found a fox for every chicken coop in Washington, and a Twitter finger must not become a trigger finger.
Here at home, in a move of solidarity with women's marches in the U.S. and around the world, several hundred Israelis attended a rally last night outside the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv, protesting American President Donald Trump's appointment. The event was organized by Pantsuit Nation Israel, part of a global Facebook movement founded in support of Hillary Clinton during the U.S. presidential elections. Many present expressed anger and frustration over the nomination and inauguration of America's 45th president.
I'm here because I believe that Donald Trump is a sexist. I believe he's a misogynist, and I also believe that he's extremely racist, and I think that we shouldn't have people like that as the president of one of the greatest countries in the world.
Palestinians in the West Bank city of Bethlehem also protested the inauguration of U.S. President Donald Trump, but for a different reason. Gathering near the West Bank security barrier, some of the protesters sent fire to posters of Trump, and others stomped on them. Those present said they objected to Trump's plans to transfer the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, declaring they have a right to Jerusalem as the eternal capital of a Palestinian state, and emphasizing they will never agree to any compromise on the matter. Also yesterday, the Palestinian National and Islamic Forces, a coalition comprised of representatives from Fatah, Hamas, and Islamic Jihad, warned if the U.S. moves the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, it will be considered an act of war. In his first appearance, White House spokesman Sean Spicer blasted the media for what he called its inaccurate coverage of the crowd size that attended President Donald Trump's inauguration. This after media outlets across the world claimed more people took to the streets to protest Trump's appointment than those who attended Friday's inauguration ceremony.
The president is committed to unifying our country, and that was the focus of his inaugural address. This kind of dishonesty in the media, the challenging that bringing about our nation together, is making it more difficult. There's been a lot of talk in the media about the responsibility to hold Donald Trump accountable. And I'm here to tell you that it goes two ways. We're going to hold the press accountable as well. The American people deserve better, and as long as he serves as the messenger for this incredible movement, he will take his message directly to the American people, where his focus will always be.
President Reuven Rivlin sent U.S. President Donald Trump a letter congratulating him of his inauguration, wishing him success, and inviting him to visit Jerusalem. President Rivlin sent the letter after he was released from Shaare Zedek Hospital on Friday, where he had a pacemaker inserted to regulate his heartbeat. The 77-year-old Rivlin thanked the medical staff as well as members of the public concerned for his health. The president was reported to have resumed business as usual today. Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Guy Eisenkot was released from Beilinson Hospital in Petah Tikva last night and headed to his home for recovery after undergoing surgery to remove a cancerous growth from his prostate Thursday. Professor Jack Benil, head of the urology unit at the hospital, told the reporters Eisenkot will require a 2-week rest before resuming office. During this period, Eisenkot will be replaced by Deputy Chief of Staff Major General Yair Golani. A senior IDF officer with the rank of colonel who serves in the Northern Command has been suspended from his post for 7 days after an encrypted military mobile phone and classified documents were stolen from his vehicle. On discovering the robbery, the colonel immediately notified his superiors. Head of the Army's Northern Command, Major General Aviv Kochavi, dismissed the colonel from his post and ordered a military police to investigate the incident. 2 men in their 30s were shot dead in the stairwell of an underground parking garage in Migdalei, Tel Aviv last night in what police are describing as an apparent underworld killing. Abed Ayash, who was known to police, was shot dead along with his security guard, Mohammed Asraf Ayash. Ayash was accompanied by his wife and 2-year-old son and was heading towards the stairwell when the attack occurred. His wife and child were unharmed. Ayash, initially from Jaffa, lived in a Tel Aviv apartment block in Rehov Totzeret Haaretz, and he was arrested in the summer over suspicions of involvement in the murder of a criminal, but was released to house arrest last July. Police are searching for the perpetrators of the shooting who fled the scene. And the new Jerusalem-Tel Aviv highway tunnels, which opened on Friday, turned out to be a disappointing traffic jam for commuters this morning. Despite the fanfare, movement on the Harel tunnels and Motza bridges was bumper to bumper during morning hours. Nativ Yisrael, which is responsible for the road, explained that the traffic arrangements were still new and that for now only 2 lanes were open, but they hope to soon to open the 3rd lane in both directions. However, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and as we kick off a new week, here are 5 good news stories that may put a smile on your face. Israel has been ranked 10th most innovative nation in the world by Bloomberg News site. Israel and Jordan began laying the groundwork for building a free trade zone. The shared industrial area that spans on both countries will include factories and a bridge and will provide some 13,000 jobs for Israelis and Jordanians. Israel's National Library has acquired thousands of Hebrew manuscripts and books from one of the most significant collections in the world. The Val Madonna Trust contains some 10,000 items, including a 15th century copy of the Hebrew Bible and one of the only 2 surviving copies of a 16th century Passover manuscript from Prague. Israeli scientist prepares to live on Mars. Representing the Israeli Space Agency, Weizmann Institute research student Roy Naor will be living inside an isolated capsule in the Utah desert for the next 2 weeks, along with team members from 5 other countries. The capsule simulates Mars Research Station. And a special message of gratitude from the president of Sierra Leone, who during a recent visit to Israel thanked the Jewish state for helping the country fight the Ebola virus. In finance, the stock exchange was mixed and the currency markets are still closed for the weekend. Here are the numbers. Taking a look at the weather, and the forecast is for slightly warmer temperatures with strong easterly winds in the north and hilly regions. Here are the expected highs and lows for the next 24 hours. That's all for this newscast. We'll be back here tomorrow, same time, same channel, with the latest news from Israel. Until then, I'm Aryeh O'Sullivan wishing you a good evening and shalom from Jerusalem.